It's going to give you a little bit more difficulty because not as worked as that mealy crust is. So we're going to give a little bit of flour here. And let's do a couple things with it. We want to get that, let's say I'm going to make one pie with a solid crust. I want to make one with a lattice. So that you guys be able to see both of those. There have been a few of you that are already eyeing my cookie cutters and things like that. There are some possibilities with those, with cutting out pieces and fitting them together in such a way to make a decorative top. And that looks great. It's perfectly good to do that. You'll just want to make sure that your gaps between your pieces of crust are fairly small so that you won't have a lot of exposed apple. If you suspect that you don't have enough flour underneath, just lift a corner. Put some flour back under there. It's just a good way to be sure that you're not going to have a problem with sticking, especially on stainless steel tables. I find that they tend to like to stick to dough. As some of you have already found out, I'm sure, that some of them really like to stick to dough. Now you can see this dough is already, wanting to break apart. There's a flake right there, a shingle that's trying to break itself loose. This is just a fold where it got folded over. But if you run into little things like that, keep your eyes open. Don't forget that those little problems can be worked on while you're rolling. You don't have to put yourself in a situation where it's difficult. All you have to do is just spot those things coming, spot the problems before they come. It's sort of like when you're driving a car and you see a problem coming. The deer comes up to the side of the road, right, and you watch that deer. You know what the deer is going to do, right? Right? At least you hope you think that's what the deer might do. If the deer does run in front of you, then you're prepared. On the other hand,
before your car goes by, don't they?
Well, sometimes I think they do. They do target us. I've had a few deer impale themselves on the front of my car, and it's sad, but,
Not much you can do when they jump into the car.
No, the best you can do is to anticipate it as much as you possibly can. Just try to deal with the problem. The same thing goes for your pie dough. If you see a problem starting to occur, deal with it. And deal with it right away so that you don't ever have to worry about it. You can see I spotted that flour starting to get thin. I thought, I better do something about that. There's other strategies when it comes to rolling. If you don't think you have enough in the middle, you've got some extra thickness over here, put your rolling pin right here and roll backwards. Drive some of that material into the center. There's no reason why you always have to roll forwards. And I think I've got about enough material here to do the job. I also have this thing about rolling that you should always move the dough to you. You shouldn't have to work around it, and you shouldn't have to walk around the table. If you're really controlling the dough, you just move the dough. You stay in one place. So that makes for about a nice size. And I can already see, just by looking at this, that it's got these different blotches in it, sort of light areas, dark areas. That's the butter. Those shingles are overlapping. And as I've rolled it out, those shingles got even thinner and smaller, and they're able to, they're going to make for some really nice flaky dough on top. To make this the right size for this, we're going to go ahead and cut a piece that's about the right size, give or take. Just a little bit of overlap here, just to make sure I've got enough. The rest of it, on the other hand, we're going to use for the lattice. So for lattice work, all you have to do is choose how thick and wide you want that lattice to be, and just start making strips. In this case, make lots of them, because you're probably going to need it. If it starts sticking to the wheel, just sort of stop for a moment and let it go. And you may be thinking, why in the world is he making such short ones? Well, remember, there are places on the pie where you're going to need short ones. One did so. See, along these areas of this area of the pie, these little corners on the sides, that's where we use short ones. So we'll use short little lattices in many different parts of the pie. When we go to make our lattice work, all we have to do, and we can do this after we have apples in there, but let me just give you a little preview as to how it works. If I put a piece of dough down about every inch or so, then all I have to do in order to make the lattice is lift up the ends of certain pieces and interlace in some other pieces. And it's not terribly hard to do. Once you start to understand the theory behind it, it works very well. So let's say I take every other piece and I fold it back halfway. Then I take another piece and I put it in here and I fold these back to where they originally were. Then I fold back the opposite ones halfway. And I put one inside here, keeping the spacing about similar to where I started. And you just keep doing this, going every other piece like this, folding them back, putting another piece in the middle, and folding them in. You can see how you can build that lattice right there on the surface. Now, I know people who make lattices on a surface like this, put them on a piece of parchment, put them in the freezer until they're frozen solid, and then they'll lift the whole thing and put it on their pie. You could. It is easy to break it, but if you're careful, you can slide it right off onto the pie. That's one option. My favorite way is simply to build it on the pie itself as you're building your pie. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to go ahead and pull this apart. I think my apples are cool enough now. I just eyed it when it came to cornstarch, and I really kind of got some good results with cornstarch. Now mine's like really thick. I was surprised at how thick it got. So I already can see here. Let me pull it, get a scrap. I already see here I've got a little trouble area right in here. I'm just going to go ahead and patch that up a little bit to make sure that I have enough dough there. And I'll trim some of that excess off.
Using the back of the knife.
Yeah, just to kind of break that off a little bit so it's not quite so big. And we'll put some apples in. Now it says to put about 2 pounds in. This is roughly the right amount of apples for a whole pie, so it's a lot of apples. Yeah.
Mine is.
If some of you may be draining some of your juice off, and that's perfectly okay to do. If your juice is really thick like mine, then you can just throw it in there. It will thicken though. A lot of your juice will thicken. So if you're draining some off, that's okay. Just remember that there's still cornstarch in that liquid that's remaining, and it will thicken up as it cooks. So I think you'll find that it'll give you pretty good results. Now that's for these little short pieces. You saw I had these little short pieces. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use those here on the ends where things need to be short, and where they'll still be long enough to do their job. The long ones here, of course, will go in the middle. Let's put that one right in the middle. I am trying to work fairly quickly because, remember, this is butter, and we're under hot lights right now, and I don't want this stuff to start melting.
Didn't put no butter.
Oh, you're right. We didn't put any butter. One thing that Terry and I have been discussing earlier was putting a little bit of butter into your pie. Just a little bit, little dabs of butter. It just adds some richness, and It will mix in with your